approach for the model design. Okay, it automates the extract, load, transform processes. It also creates the data warehouse and semantic layer and all those good things. So what this picture shows here is on the top layer, it shows the concepts specific for the data hub. On the bottom, it just shows the generalized concepts. So let's talk about the generalized concepts and then I can explain how they map to the data hub. In any company, there are multiple sources of data. There are things that are on your premises, there are things in cloud, there are files, there is APIs which talk to other things like Salesforce and whatever other things you may have, the Facebook, the LinkedIn or whatnot, right? Everybody wants one source of truth. And that's what the data warehousing is all about, right? So all of these sources of data come into the data warehouse. The first stop is the staging table where they basically just land as is. Then all the different transforms happen on those tables. And then the data becomes available in the shape of views, which has all the transforms put together. Then the data gets modeled optionally into something called semantic layer or a multidimensional cube. And finally, that semantic layer can power up the reporting. Now, reporting, reporting could be done Reporting could be done in any of the platforms like either Power BI or Tableau, or you can also use the Zap reporting interface if you wanted. Now, here is the comparison of it to the data hub concepts. So the sources of data, no changes, but when the staging and transformations, all of that happens here in load and transform phases. In terms of our class, today we will be focusing all about extract. Extract and load, basically. Tomorrow's class is going to be all about transform and we will learn all different kinds of transformations. And the day after tomorrow, if you plan on coming in, we will be talking all about here in the semantic layer. Okay, so that's kind of how it is put together and that's kind of how we will arrange our training material. All right. Any questions at this point, guys?
All good from my side, thanks.
All good? Okay, very good. Very good. Now here is the business case that we will be working with. Give me guys 1 second, okay? All right. So here is our business case for today. Today we will be learning to deploy a data model and a solution analytics. And the second part of the business case is we will expand our data model specifically for supporting the sales quote reporting. All right. So it's like just like real life. We are starting from scratch, ground up. We will learn how to put together data model ground up with solution analytics. And then we will customize it for something that we want specifically, which is related to the sales quote reporting. Right? And with that, let's jump on to the demo. Now at this part, I would recommend all of you to get on to your Academy servers. You all should have received the invitations yesterday, either from Academy 1, 2 or 3. The invitation email looks like this. And then there is a little join link onto it where if you click on the join, it would take you to the Academy servers. Okay. I would wait here for a few moments so you all get a chance to join. Okay, so let's get going. Let's go ahead and expand this top ribbon here. And there are two options, new and home. Okay. In the new section, we're going to look for data model. All right. Because that's the goal today. We want to learn how to create a data model, right? So let's go ahead and click on new data model. Now there are two different ways you can create a model. One is you can connect to a source to create a model, or you can deploy it through a solution analytics, right? Now Data Hub, it has multiple connectors and solutions available. Now what does solution mean? Well, it just provides a templated quick start approach, right? So that means you can pick a connection and a solution for some of the things that are out here already, and it comes with the model and comes with some reporting with it. Or you can simply say, well, never mind, I don't want that templated reporting. I would just rather like to get the connection to the source, and then I'll figure it out by myself. And that's just fine. So that's the second method of doing it as well. Okay. Now, depending upon what kind of license you have and what kind of things you have, you might see some of these connectors, you might see all of it, or you might just see one or two. So depending upon again what that licensing is, it changes as to what you see here. In our training environment, we just see all of it because that's how the access is created. Okay. Now for our training purposes, what we're going to do is on the right side where it has files and others, we're going to click on the source called training. Okay. And here are two choices. One, first method where we can deploy where we can connect to our training source as well as deploy the analytics. And second one is we can simply get the connection and do everything rest on all on our own. We are going to choose the first method. Okay. So click on the training and then click deploy. Now this training source is simply Azure SQL source that we have. It's like a simple database and simple SQL server, and that's exactly what we will be using for our training. Before I go into the configuration though, let me jump quickly onto my slides because I want to talk to you about the data gateway. Now at this point, as we were saying, the training source is the simple Azure SQL source. It's just Azure to Azure in this case. However, in your training environment, in your production environment, you may have the source on the ground or you may have source in the cloud. Now, if that's the case, you may need something called data gateway. So say that you have your source on the ground, your databases, your applications, etc., and you want to connect to the data hub that is in the cloud. This dotted line here is just a visual representation of simply the data gateway. Or if you want to go across the networks, so say that your data hub is on network 1 and all your sources are on network 2 and you just want to go across, so you need something called data gateway. Okay. Data gateway is just simply a means to translate amongst the networks or translate between the cloud and the ground. It's really simple little application that you would put on configure and that enables the communication. Okay. All right. Now in this case, we don't need the data gateway for the training because we are all just using the Azure and our data hub is also on Azure. Okay. This is the server we'll be connecting to. That's the username. You don't have to change password. The database we'll be using today is training and the caption language is English. So pretty standard, simple. Go ahead, hit test connection. Okay. Getting the green checkbox here, just telling us that the connection to that server was okay. And then let's go ahead, hit next. All right. So at this point, it went through our source and it found a few things. It said, hey, your source has transactions about these 5 different companies. Pick your primary company. Now, when it asks for that, what that really means is it's simply asking us, all your transactions, what kind of currency you would like the conversion. That way, when you ask a bigger question, like how much is my gross revenue, you don't want like certain numbers in dollars and certain numbers in pounds. You don't want like different currencies going like that. You kind of want one thing, and how it decides what that one thing could be is using this primary company. Now in this case, we're just going to simply say that amongst these 5 companies, our primary company is this USA FR10. That way all the transactions, all the amounts and everything get converted into US dollars. Okay. And when ready, go ahead, hit next. All right. So at this point, technically, we are ready to create our data model. We just have few other things to do. One important thing here we're going to do is we're going to give the name for our model. Okay. By default, it just gives the name of the source, which is training. What I would like you all to do is put on underscore, write down either your name or initials, mostly the name, and then and then May 4th. That way, we would all recognize our own models and we won't get confused. Okay. Now, second thing I would like us to change is where this model is going to reside. Now, by default, for me, it's going to go personal folder Rashmi. That's perfect. That's exactly where I want it to go. For all of you, make sure that it's going in your personal folder and your own folder. Okay. If it's not going there by default, click browse and you would see a personal folder and a public folder. Make sure you are not saving anything in public folder. Everything should go in your personal folder. Okay. Let me watch my team screen. Let me know if you all are with me or if any questions. If I could get maybe a few thumbs ups to let me know that you all are with me, that will be great. Okay, I see a couple. Thank you. Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Can we just check if Angelique is caught up already?
Yeah. How are you
Thank
doing,
you.
Angelique?
Okay, no, she's not. She's getting a 404 error. So she's joined me. She will catch up. We will try and sort her out during the break. We don't want to hold everybody up.
Okay.
Do you mind just refreshing the browser? Like close out the browser and refresh it, Angelique,
Okay,
and see if that helps. Yeah.
okay. She's going back to her office after she knocked over glass in mine.
Or
I'm
maybe
sorry, I
during
just
the
want to,
break if you would like. Yeah. In the
yeah,
break,
yeah, yeah.
try to
Just want to
refresh.
get
Yeah.
back
And
to
if it
our,
still doesn't go through, then let me know and I could send
yeah,
invite one more time. Okay.
okay, okay.
All right. Everybody else okay though? So far with me? Okay. All right. Now here for the modules, it's asking us what kind of modules we want when it will come out from the solution analytics. We're going to see, we're going to get all of it. We can always change this after the fact if you like. Okay. Hit next. And here it will be creating the model. Now, what happens at this point is for each one of these machines, right, Academy 1, 2, and 3, it creates 2 models at a time. So we all are going to hit the next button. So we all are going to go in the queue, and depending upon the split second difference we all may have in hitting that button, it's going to pick 2 models. It's going to create it, and then it will pick up the next two. So if you see that this gear churning and churning for a long time, that just means that it's working on two and then it will pick up yours. So at this point, I think it would be wise for us if we take our 10-minute break. That will give it a time to finish for everybody, and then we can come back and proceed. Okay. All right. Very good. So now, if you are at this point, that means the basic model is created, and now we are about configuration of that model. We have first question at our hand is selecting financial dimensions. It's simply asking, are we interested in getting any of these financial dimensions out of the box? Just for demonstration, we will pick few. We'll pick cost center, we would pick entities, maybe industry and product. You can again come back to it, change it if you like. So I picked cost center, entities, industry and product. Okay, go ahead, go next. And next question, it's going to ask us about configuring calendars. Now, before we get to that, let's talk a little bit about the calendars. Now, in any company, typically your calendar year begins in January, ends in December 31st. However, each company differs when it comes to the fiscal calendar. For some people, the fiscal calendar begins in, say, October. For some people, it starts in April. For some people, it starts like somewhere in the middle, like 15th of July or something like that, right?
Rashmi,
So, yes.
Rashmi, yeah, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I've got a question and I don't know how to. I put up my hand, but it doesn't seem to. If you can see it, if I put up my hand, those dimensions. When we configure the model or create the model, is those dimensions already built in, or at what point do we configure those dimensions or build those dimensions?
So the financial dimensions, you just pick them through your solution, and then other dimensions that we would configure, and we will learn how to do that in the class.
Okay, so I'm preempting, sorry.
No worries. Do we have any other question? No.
Doesn't
Okay.
look like.
All right. My screen is still showing.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. All right. Good. All right. So next step, we were talking about the calendars, and we were talking about the fiscal calendars, that everybody can have different fiscal calendars depending upon their company. At this step, while creating our model, it's important decision to make sure we set up our calendars just right. We have 4 choices that come out of the box where it asks us, looking at data, it found that we have transactions starting in January 1st, 2018. And then it says, I'm going to create your date table starting from January 1st, 2018, going 2 years from your current year. Now it's important to kind of understand your business a little bit and see how much in future you really need. See that if this was like a hospital type of business, or if your patients come in for like a recurring type of appointments where they get booked out in future, you might need 2 years, might need 3 years, etc. Depends upon how your sales cycle goes. Say that you book contracts, and you book contracts 5 years in future, and you kind of want to see that in your reporting, you might want to change that to 5 years. But say that if this was a small business where nothing really in future gets booked up, at the most in future it gets booked up is say 3 months, then maybe just current year plus one is just fine. So again, depending upon what your business is, you might want to select this last day, because what's going to happen is in our model, all of our core tables going to get joined against this date table. So you would be able to kind of have that window of time where you can see all your reporting. And this will enable us to do things like, well, how much was my gross revenue last year? And how much is my projected revenue next year and year after and stuff like that. So you kind of have to have that properly set up. Again, there is no wrong answer. So say you set up your model like this, but then as you start creating your reports or your report designer starts saying that, hey, I can see 2 years in future, but I really want to see 4 now, or I really want to see 10 now, or whatever. You can always come back to it and make a change. It's not very hard. Another thing is about the date format. Now it picks up whatever the date format it has figured by looking at the data, which is this date, the alphabetical or the 3 letter for the month and then 4 digits for the year. Okay, and then here are your 4 calendars. Calendar YQMD, that means your calendar month and date. Now calendar always starts in January, right? So it's year broken down in quarters, broken down in months, broken down in days. Next type of calendar hierarchy is YWD, where your year breaks down into 52 or 53 weeks, depending upon what that year is. And then every week breaks down into days. Now, if you click on any one of these, you have an option to configure it differently. We're not going to change anything for our training model, but in your production environment, you want to think this through and make sure you set it up appropriately. Things like in YWD, it asks us when does your week begins? It week starts in Sunday or Monday or Saturday, etc. Do you think in terms of semesters? Yes or no? And then in the fiscal piece, it asks things like when does your fiscal calendar begins? Now for our training model, we kind of going to keep it simple where our fiscal and calendar both begins on January 1st. However, in again production environment, this may be different. Your fiscal might start where you can specify starts on 1st of July or 15th of July, etc. Whatever the case may be. Again, same thing. Do you believe or do you think in terms of semesters? So do you go years broken by semesters, broken by quarters, broken by month? You go like that, or you go year, quarter, month. Yeah. And then another flavor on the fiscal is same YWD, where you have year and then your fiscal weeks followed by your days. All right. Now we're not going to make any changes, but again, important to understand the concept of this date, which in turn turns into our date dimension, which kind of goes in the heart of our data model. Okay. When ready, we're going to go hit finish. And that is going to create our very first data model. Okay.
Sorry, another question. Looking at this, am I correct in understanding then that you could create dimensions like a toolbox of dimensions which you can then apply to different models as you continue?
Ask one more time, please.
Okay. My question is, and I'm referring to my previous question, that list of dimensions that we had. Say, for instance, in the ERP environment, if we have other dimensions that we need to define or need to filter on, for instance, can we pre-build all these dimensions, which we then can apply to the different models separately?
Yes, of course. You could create more dimensions than what we picked, and we're going to learn actually how to.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, at this point, we have created our data model from our solution. So this is how it comes out from the box. Next, our second piece of the business case is customizing this for the quote analysis, where we will learn how to create quote related dimensions, which will give you an example of the question that you are kind of thinking through.
Thank you very much.
Yep, you're welcome. All right. So at this point, this is our model that came out from the solution. Let's learn or let's see what things it built for us, and then I can show you how to bring in more than what it did for us out of the box. Okay. These are all the pieces of the model. Data source, very self-explanatory, is just going to get us where it's getting data from. Pipelines, now this is important. This is where it's going to tell us what it's bringing from that SQL database that we connected to. Relationships is how different entities from that SQL data source are related with each other. Process configuration talks about how we can automate processing of our data model. Database scripts is if you are again coming from SQL background and if you want to do something where you want to write a lot of SQL code and don't want to use any of the UI elements of doing the similar, you have ability to do that by writing the script. So that's that. Parameters is certain parameters that it created for us on the model level, and we'll talk about what those are and how you can add your own. Roles is regarding security. That's how it understands who should see what in our data model. Modules is something that we picked, which nothing but simply the collection of our tables from the data source. The finance module has everything from finance, inventory has everything from inventory, so on and so forth. And reporting calculations. Now this is very important and interesting thing is lot of typical calculations like your AR, your AP, your GL balance, stuff like that. It creates calculations out of the box for you. So you could use this data model into another reporting tools like Power BI or Tableau, etc. So you don't have to write all those calculations from scratch again. So like for example, in Power BI, if you only to connect to the SQL source, you would have to write all the DAX statements to create a lot of calculations. This creates it for you. So you just refer it to the semantic layer and you can pick up all these calculations. We're going to talk a little bit more on that in the third day on the semantic layering class, where we'll kind of think that through a little bit more. But in a nutshell, these are the all parts of the model. Let's investigate one at a time. Data sources. So training is that data source, the SQL data source that we connected to. Where these two other came from? These two are the SQL, are Excel files that it uses for some of the internal pipelines and relationships it does. The first one is the common chart mapping and the model extensions. Common chart mapping, it uses when it generates like financial statements and balance sheets and P&L, etc. That's simply just saying, you know, in this sample company, what accounts are like cash accounts, what accounts are your AR accounts, what accounts are AP accounts, stuff like that. Now, in the production environment, or if I'm working with a client, what typically we do is create the model just like this from solution and then customize it. So then my next step normally goes to working with their business users or finance folks and asking like, hey, now in your system, in your ERP, which accounts do you consider cash accounts? Which do you consider as your AR account or bad debt account or whatever the case may be? So then you can set that up in this Excel file. And what happens is in the model, it uses those codes for various calculations. So then in the reporting that it comes, so let's see here, finance, and I'm just going to open up this CFO dashboard just as an example. When it creates all these things, right, the how much is the AP, how much is AR, the liquidity ratio, etc. It uses those codes to come up with the calculations to bring up this analytics upon the surface. Okay, so that's typically how the process wise we go. Okay. Pipelines is 142 different pipelines. So the way to read this is simply the name of the pipeline, what path that pipeline came from, what source it came from. So either it's coming from either of these resources, or you may see some pipelines which are coming from the SQL queries. So that's how we kind of, the folks out here kind of thought through as to typical analytics people use for finance and inventory and procurement and sales. And they wrote all the code to make this happen uh, automatically out of the box. I see a question. Yeah, Lawrence, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I seem to be okay. Please excuse me, but I like to ask questions. What is the definition of a pipeline?
We will be talking about that as well.
Okay, no
Yeah,
problem.
okay,
Thanks.
no worries. Next piece is on the relationships, where it gives us idea of how these various pipelines are connected with each other. So when we create our own pipeline, we will be creating certain relationships as well. Now, as Lawrence asked us, what's the definition of a pipeline? Well, pipeline is simply the mechanism of moving data from place A to place B. So in this case, when you look at account classes, it is simply a pipeline which is moving a table called account classes from the source training database into the staging environment. So let's go back to the picture here. And pipeline is simply this little line here, which moves one table from your source into your initial or the staging table, which then becomes available to put the transforms on the top.
And the method of that transfer is a SQL query, or is how's that executed?
Okay, so again, that transform piece we will be discussing much in depth tomorrow, but just to provide you an answer, you could do either. So you could write the SQL queries on top of the staging tables, or you could use some of the transforms that are built in into the data hub to create a lot of common things that typically are needed in any business case.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'll be patient. Okay. Thanks.
Yep. All right. Now, relationships, typically, if you are going after any data source and going to get, say, 10 different tables from that data source, they are not much of a meaning if they are just by themselves. The meaning comes when they are all associated with each other. And that association is simply the relationship. And that's how you could do things like provide me my sales revenue or provide my gross revenue for last year for all the stores in United States, or multiple other things like show me my revenue for last year for stores in United States where I sold blue pants, stuff like that, right? So the relationships basically enable the reporting amongst multiple entities at one time on one screen. And that's where here it just defines how things are related. And there are multiple ways to get to these relationships, but this is a simply quick overview where you can also do things like in the to pipeline as an example, you can look for, say, the date, right? The pipeline that we created by configuring our calendar. And here we could see that date dimension is associated with multiple tables that are in our model. But what's different is how it's associated. So the date pipeline is associated, for example, on purchase invoice lines on invoice date, but it is associated also on the sales invoice lines on the sales invoice date, right? So two different things. Purchase invoice dates will be different than sales invoice dates. And this concept is basically called role-playing dimension, where your one pipeline gets associated with another pipeline, but what changes is just the column that it uses for the association. Okay. Now, with all that being said, let's learn about how to add things that didn't came with our model or with our solution. And in the process, we will learn some of the things that we are curious about as to how to bring in extra pipelines, how to create more relationships, how to set them up as dimensions, etc. All right. So for that, let's go ahead and click on the training data source. All right. Now here it's giving us all the available tables. Now for some of the tables next to it, you see this little icon. That's the pipeline icon. That means these tables are moved into our data model already by the virtue of existing pipeline, okay, which is basically this line here, okay. Now what we want is we want couple other tables that didn't came into our data model. So in the table search box here, start typing quote.
Reshma,
Yes.
yeah. Can you, if you can just go one big step back to the training, uh,
Uh-huh.
of you, I'm still on
Here,
the, yeah. Oh, you click on the,
yeah, click on the training.
oh, training. Okay.
Yeah, and that should open up the data source.
100% I got it. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And then in the table list, search for quote and it should bring up these two tables which are not made as pipelines yet. All right. So these two tables here, they are about sales quotes. So whatever quotes we have been writing or our sales team has been writing, they get recorded into this sales quote header and quote detail. Let's go ahead and click onto this quote header table. On the bottom here, it shows a quick preview. So this is kind of handy if you are not exactly sure what tables have say sales quote information, but you know that I want to bring that to my model. I just don't know what it is. You could kind of look for the tables, look in the information, and then make the proper educated guess, right? Now in this case, I know that these two have the quote related information that I want. What is missing is they are just not in my model yet. So go ahead and click both of these and then click as add pipelines. Okay. Now again, when you are adding these, it seems to again do a little queue of two at a time. So if you see that yours is spinning for a little longer, it probably just that it picked two models to add pipelines, and once it finishes, it would take two more and two more after. Okay. So before we came in and added this code, we knew that there were 147 pipelines, right? So now what we expect is after adding these two, we should have 149 pipelines. That means these two are coming to our model, and then that makes them available to set up the columns appropriately, to set up these pipelines appropriately so we can use it for our reporting. Okay. So give it a moment to finish.
Rashmin, just another question. These tables, I assume they are proper tables in your SQL data source. Does it recognize views as a table as well or not?
Or if you have the view into your SQL Server, yes.
Okay, so it will recognize a view as a table then as well in here.
Yes, yes, you have
Perfect.
option to, yeah. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course, yeah. You also have option to choose when you bring it in, do you want it as a table or a materialized view? So if that's helpful, I mean on the model side as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Yep, you're welcome. All right, so mine has finished, but I will wait here because it seems like it went on to the second layer of the queue. If you could provide me a few thumbs ups when yours is finished, it should get all the checkboxes here on the right. And then when we go back, in the pipelines. And if we look for quote, we should see two extra pipelines here, the quote header and the quote detail. Okay, I'll look on my teams, let me know when your two new pipelines get added, and then we will continue. Okay, I see a few thumbs ups, thank you. Okay, and there is a question. Hey, Mary. Please unmute yourself so we could hear the question.
Raise a thumbs up.
Oh,
Sorry
the
about
thumbs
that.
up. Okay. Okay, all right. Thank you. Okay, very good. Is anybody still waiting on getting those pipelines added? You okay to proceed?
I'm still waiting. One sec.
Waiting? Okay, yeah, no worries. Yeah.
Okay, now I'm sorted. Thank you.
Finished? Okay. All right. Okay, very good. So now we got our two brand new pipelines here. Very good. So now let's understand what it brought in when it brought those two tables in as a pipeline. Okay. So we're going to click on one of these. Let's look for the quote header. Let's go ahead, click on the quote header. All right. And here we go. This is the body of the pipeline. So very first thing here is the source where it tells us what table it connected to and from where. So from our training data source, quote header pipeline came from quote header table. Okay. Now the next on the columns, it tells us which columns did it pick from that quote header table. Now way to read this is in and out. That means what came in from the SQL table and what's going to go out from this step. Okay. Quote number as an example came in, going to go out as the string or the text 20. The amount, interval, whatever it came in is going to go out as decimal, so on and so forth, right? Now what we're going to do here is we're going to add few more columns, or we're going to ensure that it got all the columns that we wanted. So we're going to click on this little box called columns. Okay. And as a matter of fact, there were so many of these columns available, it didn't pick those. Now why it does that is if it sees that all rows of these columns are blank, it doesn't pick it because it says, well, there is no value bringing it in. That doesn't mean you can't override it. So in this case, rate type is one of those columns that it saw it's not needed, but as a designer, say that you know that I'm going to need it, you're going to click that and apply. Okay. It's going to add that into our pipeline. After it finishes, we're going to look into few other things into these columns. Okay. So let's go down. And let's look for this guy, code type. There we go. Okay. Now another thing I would like us to see is say this quote number. Yeah. Any column that we click from this quote header pipeline, we see a few things about it to the right. It's a quick profile. It says that there are 100% distinct values in this column and 100% rows are with values. Now that clearly says that this could be like a primary key on this table, right? Every row is distinctly defined. Basically, that's what it is. Okay. Now another piece to see here is for every column, we could see the data type for that column. So here, for the quote number to the right, we see this little a, which is the text. So you could either see it there or you could see it over here. Yeah, for the one next to it is the decimal, so on and so forth. You have ability to override that as well. But what it does is it does its best judgment when it comes out of the box. And of course, you have ability to change that if you wanted to. Okay. Now, as we made a change in this quote header pipeline, go ahead and save on to left. Save button is on the top left. Okay. Go ahead and close this quote header pipeline. And let's go to the code detail pipeline. All right. Now in this code detail pipeline, again, let's go in columns. And we have a flag here called taxable flag. Right here. Taxable flag. Click on it, apply.
I think I missed something. Can't find that field. I'm sure I'm missing something.
Oh, are you in the code detail pipeline?
I'm in the quite detailed pipeline. We're looking for which field?
Columns. Taxable flag.
Taxable flag. Ah, there we go. Okay. My
Okay.
apologies.
Oh, no worries. All right. Checkbox and apply and then hit save. All right. Now, one other thing we're going to do here is in this code detail pipeline, we're going to look for a column called quote quantity, which is up here on the bottom. Quote quantity. All right. With that being clicked, we're going to go onto the right side here and we're just simply going to change the name of this column. So say this is a text box, so we can just write quote QTY. Okay, that way, for when our report designer start using this model, they would get a little shorter name, quote QTY. Okay, save. And finally, let's learn how to update a data type. So let's look for a column called quote line. Right here. All right. And this quote line, click on this drop down to the right where it's a hash sign, that means it's trying to take this as an integer. We want to change that to the text. So we're going to do A and length, set it to 50. And OK. All right. Then we save. All right. Let me watch my team screen and let me know if you are all with me or if anybody has any question. Okay, I see a few thumbs ups. Thank you. Very good. Oh, I see all thumbs ups. Thank you very much. All right. Okay. So at this point, one other thing we see which looks different for every column here, right? Certain columns have a little sigma icon. Certain columns have this little ruler icon. Some other columns have this little table icons. What does that mean? That means that in our model, when our report designers start using our model, these ruler icons, those are the measures. That means those are mathematical numbers. So they can slice and dice that number by attributes. Attributes is something that you can use to describe. Attributes are nothing but the columns in your dimension table, right? So one can say that show me the commission rate, because it's a measure, show me a commission rate for all my locations in United States. So that location will be a dimension. So if it's not already created in the table, you could create it in the same fashion. If it's created already, then simply you would need to do is the relationships, which we are actually going to learn tomorrow when we talk about our transforms sections about the relationships and various ways of relationships, etc. Okay. All right. Okay. Any questions at this point? Let me watch my team screen. Yeah, okay. All right. So now we created our model. We customized it by bringing in two pipelines. Then we went through that pipeline. We looked at the columns. We brought in the columns that it didn't came with. And we made a few other updates to those pipelines as to the data types and also as to the names of the columns. What we have not done yet is we have not thought through as to how we can keep this updated, how we can keep it refreshed. Because right now it pulled all the data at the time we pulled it, right? But in your production environment or in real life, that's never enough because everybody wants the updated data. Everybody wants to see the transactions that happened in the most recent times or whatnot, right? So we need a way to make sure that we keep on bringing in updated data every time, every day, or a few times a day, etc. And that setup is called publishing, processing and publishing. So if we look into process configuration, there is an option to set up process configurations. Here, watch my screen. You don't need to follow along on this part with me because we're not going to actually set one up because we don't have any intentions of updating this training model every day. But this is how you would do in your production environment. Yeah. So you would set up your process configuration and there are a couple options. One, it asks us, hey, whenever this process configuration runs, what you would like it to do? Well, there are a couple things. You can say, well, I would like it to migrate the source data, perform all my transformations, and also process my semantic layer. Do that for all my pipelines, for all my database scripts, and then that's it. Then it asks us, how do you want the data load to happen? And there are three choices. One is default incremental, second one is quick incremental, and last one is full refresh. Full refresh means dump and load. That means dump everything from my tables and load them fresh. Quick incremental means only load the new data. That means if I have pulled the information at 4 o'clock last night, only pull new things that happened after 4 o'clock until now. Default incremental means do something called upsert. That means insert the new things since I pulled them last and update the things that may have changed since I pulled them last. Okay. Now typically default incremental, it's typically people like to do most often. Quick incremental, as name says, is very quick because it only adds the new things. However, it has a risk of having, both of them actually have the risk of having orphans. That means if the data is deleted, both those choices don't do anything about it. Only full refresh does because it dumps and loads. Okay, so that's why typically full refresh takes longer than the quick incremental or the default incremental. Now, what we normally do when we do the implementation, or many clients choose to do this way, is they do the full refresh like once a week or maybe couple times a week in the middle of the night, and then do the default incremental every day or few times a day. You can set this up a little bit differently where you do this plus say your sales team says that, hey, we really want to keep in touch with our sales during the day. That means I really want to see how my sales is doing at 8 o'clock in the morning and then 2 o'clock in the afternoon and also at the end of the day, 6 o'clock in the evening. You could set it up just this way, but rather than loading all the pipelines, you can only cherry pick sales related pipelines and set up your configuration in such a way. And finally, at the very end, here is your schedule where you can say, daily 9 o'clock every day, or if it's only say sales related things, do that daily or hourly, each hour, or however way you would like to set that up. Okay. And lastly, if there is a failure, what you want it to happen. So you can say, well, if there is a failure, send the email to the model owner. You can choose to say, how your email should go. Is it only on failure or failure as well as success or every step in the way? So depending upon how much you want to keep in touch with your processings, you could pick your interval and you could also pick your notifications. Okay. I am going to delete this because we don't need that configuration. Okay. And lastly, processing of the model. So on the right side here, there is an option of process model, and that option basically gives us the same choices we saw. How you want to migrate your data, how many pipelines, database scripts, and what kind of processing. So depending upon, again, what your use case is, you might want to choose the method of processing your model, and that's kind of one time like manual processing. And once you are happy with your model and your content, you would set up the process configuration, and that would keep it automatically updated every time. All right. Any questions, guys?
I'm all good on my side, thank you.
Okay, very good.
Thanks, I'm good as well.
Okay, good. All right.
I actually have a question.
Yeah.
Can you force The synchronization of the data outside of the schedule. So say, for example, you're busy processing and somebody wants to know certain figures at a certain point in time. Do you have to wait for the cube to refresh, or can you force the cube to refresh?
Yeah, good question. You could force it to refresh just by processing it manually. So you would come here in the model and you would just hit this process model and that would do it right there. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, of course, you're welcome. And in that case, depending upon, how many times somebody or some specific person asks to process it, manually, you could then consider automating it a little bit by creating the configuration just for their need. You see, like if that was, say, a finance person asking, hey, I would really like to see this thing few times a day, and if they make that request like all the time to you to process it manually, you can very easily then set up the configuration so you don't have to remember doing it. Yeah, very good.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course, you're welcome. All right, let me go back to my notes and see if there is anything from our business case. There we go. Very good. So we completed both parts of our business case. We deployed our data model and looked into the what is the wizard approach of creating the model. And then we extended our data model to bring in the sales cost reporting tables and customizing those tables. We looked into the processing choices, how to automate our processing, and how to create our configurations. This covers everything I had on my mind to talk with you all today in the basic class. Tomorrow, we will continue with the same model and we will talk about the relationships. We will extend our code reporting to create the relationships between our header and the line table. And then we will bring in one more source which has the historical transactions, and then we will learn transforms like union and removing duplicates and merging, etc. Okay. Any other things before we go for the day?
No, sounds
I
good.
I I have a question, Rashmi.
Yes. Yeah.
The date parameters that is selected by year or quarter or
Yes.
semester or weekly. Um, is it purely date driven, or can it be modified to be per financial period instead of date driven? I know why we would want sales to be date driven, but financial transactions in SysPro is period driven. So that's why I'm asking the question. If a user has a date wrong, then it falls outside um, the current financial period or the previous financial period. So say, for example, they're processing stuff today, which is actually relevant to the March period 4, then the date parameter would put it outside of the financial period.
Gotcha. So the financial period and fiscal periods are same thing, Amelia, or different?
They could be different.
Could be different. Okay, yeah. So in
Yes.
that case, what you would do is just add one more calendar and you would call that financial YQMD or whatever, and then you can set it up accordingly. So, if your March is the fourth period or however way, whenever it starts and however way it ends. Now, if that starting and ending is something very custom, like say, the period starts on the day after last Saturday of April or something like that. What
Yeah.
you would then need to do is write a database script for such a thing, which is right here, a database script which will populate those columns in the date dimension, and in turn you would use those columns to create um, two additional hierarchies, and then you would use those hierarchies in your financial reporting.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yep, I have seen some unique situations for some other clients, like their calendars would start on certain, I forgot how it was, but it was like peculiar to certain season or beginning of a season. It was agricultural companies. So it was a very unique, and we end up writing just what we described to accommodate that need.
Like, for example, we've got a customer that we consolidate on, and their financial year is the one financial year might start in March, and
Yeah.
another company's financial year might start in January. Now,
Uh,
I mean, that is completely different financial periods, but I get what you're saying, and yeah, okay.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. So if you wanted a consolidated reporting for both of those, in one report, um, either have to meet on the same grounds. So keep with the calendar as an example, or you would have to write some kind of translation amongst the two in order to make that happen. Otherwise, it will not be right results, right? You would say the fourth period for company one might mean all transactions in March, but that fourth means all transactions in October for somebody else, and that
Yes,
would not be the right thing to do.
yes, no, it won't, definitely it won't. But I hear what you're saying.
Yep. Cool. Very good. Good question. Yeah, thank you for asking. All right. That actually brings up a good point. Say that you set up this model, and then 4 years down the line, right? Mergers and acquisitions and whatever happened, and now your fiscal doesn't start in October anymore. Say it starts in April. We would just simply come back in here, change your fiscal YQMD as an example starts, whatever that new start is, save process, and it would make the amends for historical as well as for going forward. Okay. Anything else, guys?
That's all from my side. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. All right. So if there are no further questions, what I will be doing is I will send out this class notes, the PowerPoint to everybody. Very last screen of the PowerPoint has the link to the labs and the class. So everything we talked today, it has a link to it. So you could use that to follow along, or just check the things out, or just want to revise certain things. It also has a little link to the survey. If you have a moment, and if you feel like filling it out, go for it. That would just help us with the classes in future. And that's all about it from my side. If you plan on coming on tomorrow, we will be meeting at the same time with the Teams meeting link, and we will continue with the same model that we started today. So it will be training underscore your name followed by the timestamp. And that's the same model we will use on the third day as well if you plan on coming in for the semantic class. Okay. Thank you very much all again for your time. I appreciate it. And I look forward to meeting with you again tomorrow, whoever is planning on coming in.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks for your
you.
time.